My name's Bryce, and if you asked me even a few months ago, I would have told you my marriage was stable. Not perfect, sure, what marriage is. But stable. Solid enough to weather things. We weren't the kind of couple who screamed in restaurants or gave each other the silent treatment for weeks. We laughed. We shared meals. We had routines. And maybe that was the problem. That night started like any other Thursday. The sky had been turning that strange greenish-gray since late afternoon, the kind of sky that always made the radio blare storm warnings on repeat. I'd been watching the trees bend in the wind from my office window when the first alert hit my phone, severe weather warning for Jefferson County. Avoid unnecessary travel. Expected hail, wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour. I remember walking into the kitchen and seeing Megan scrolling on her phone, sitting cross-legged on the counter like she always did when she was thinking through an outfit. She was smiling at something, maybe a message, maybe a meme, but when I told her about the storm, her expression barely shifted. Yeah, I saw that, she said. But it's just wind and some rain. I'll be fine. Meg, I said, leaning against the fridge, maybe just stay in tonight? We can order Thai or make popcorn. You said you were tired anyway. She hopped off the counter, already halfway to the stairs. I promised Lila I'd go. It's just a housewarming. An hour. Maybe less. There was a pause, not long, but just long enough for it to feel staged. Like she was adding it for effect. You could come, she added, without turning around. But we both knew she didn't mean it. I hated Lila's new boyfriend, a loud finance guy who wore sunglasses indoors, and Megan knew that. She was counting on my decline. Like always. I didn't fight her on it. I don't even know why. Maybe I didn't want to seem controlling. Maybe I wanted to believe she was right, that it was nothing. That the weird distance between us lately was just stress, or life, or the seasons shifting like they always do. I watched her leave around 6:15. She said it might run till 8, but she'd be home right after. She gave me a kiss, quick and light, and disappeared into the rain. That's when the silence settled in. I sat on the couch, flipping through channels without watching anything, the sound of the wind picking up outside. The trees started scraping the windows around 7:30. Still no word from her. By 8:10 I texted, "Hey, storm's getting bad. Heading home soon?" No response. I waited. 10 more minutes. Another message, "All good?" Nothing. By 8:30 I started calling. Once. Twice. 3 times. Voicemail each time. And it wasn't just the silence. It was the pattern. This was becoming a thing, the late replies, the missed calls, the vague excuses. And I kept brushing them off like a fool because the alternative was facing something I didn't want to name. At 9:01, I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened Instagram. Megan wasn't much of a poster, but her friends were. I typed in Lila's name and tapped on her story. Just a quick check, I told myself. There it was, a video probably taken just minutes earlier. Music. Laughter. A packed room, fairy lights strung along the ceiling, voices raised over the sound of bass-heavy pop. People dancing, holding drinks, posing in little groups like it was prom night. And then I saw her. Megan. Wearing a velvet green dress I didn't recognize. Off the shoulder. Elegant. A little too elegant for a casual get-together. Her hair curled the way she only did for special occasions. Her face lit up with a kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in weeks, maybe longer. She was standing close to a man in the background. His hand hovered near her back, just barely touching. Tall. Dark gray blazer. Confident posture. Familiar, almost. I paused the video. Zoomed in. And there it was, her eyes. Not glancing around, not checking her phone. Just locked on him. I felt my throat tighten. That feeling where your body knows something before your brain catches up. I replayed it again. Then again. Just a 5-second clip, but I watched it over and over like it might change. Like maybe I was imagining the way she leaned toward him. Maybe it was just the angle. But it wasn't. She wasn't looking at him like he was a friend. She was looking at him like he mattered. My stomach dropped. I sat there for another 10 minutes, the wind rattling the windows harder now, phone still in my hand, the video paused mid-laugh. I wanted to call her again. I wanted to give her a chance to explain. But somewhere in me, something just clicked, not with rage, not yet. With clarity. With the realization that the person I thought I knew might not be who she was anymore. That's the worst part. Not the betrayal, not yet. Not even the lie. The doubt. The possibility that I was already losing her and had been too blind to notice. I stared at the time on my phone, 9:18 p.m. I texted one last time, "Let me know you're safe." Nothing. Eventually, I stood, grabbed my keys, and headed out into the wind. Not because I had a plan. Not because I was going to confront her. but because I couldn't sit in that house another minute, surrounded by the photos we took on our honeymoon, the blanket she picked out last Christmas, the echo of a life that maybe wasn't ours anymore. I got in the car, turned on the engine, and just sat there in the driveway, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. I didn't know what I was going to do next. But I knew one thing: this night wasn't going to end the way I thought it would. It's funny how when you finally see the truth, everything else starts to fall into place, all the little signs you brushed off, all the quiet doubts you buried. They come rushing back like floodwater, and suddenly you're not confused anymore. You're just late. On my drive that night, engine humming under the sound of my thoughts, I kept replaying the same memories over and over. Stuff I hadn't thought about in weeks. Maybe months. Like that new perfume she bought a while back. One day, it was just sitting on the bathroom shelf, expensive, unfamiliar, with this warm, musky kind of scent that didn't match anything she usually wore. When I asked about it, she said it was a gift for a friend. Just trying it out to see if she'll like it, she'd said. I remember laughing, calling it sneaky. And then she never gave it away. Just kept wearing it, but only on the nights she went out. I thought it was odd, but I let it go. We were both busy, both distracted. At least, that's what I told myself. Then there were the late-night work calls. She started taking her laptop into the guest room, saying she needed quiet. I'd walk by and hear her talking softly through her headset, laughing sometimes. I'd knock, and she'd always seem slightly startled, like I'd interrupted something. Just one of the guys from the office, she'd say, minimizing the screen too fast. He's in Australia, time zones are nuts. At first, I believed her. I mean, why wouldn't I? She had a demanding job in marketing, always juggling different clients. But after a while, the excuses started stacking on top of each other like dominoes, just waiting to fall. I remembered the way she started flipping her phone face down, always. At first, I chalked it up to wanting to be present, which is something we both said we wanted more of. But it was constant. If I picked it up to check the time, she'd subtly reach for it like it was radioactive. She forgot her wedding ring more than once. Said her fingers were swelling. Said she took it off to do dishes. Said she left it in her gym bag. But it was always something. And every time I believed her. Or pretended to. There was one night that really hit different, though. A few weeks before the night everything fell apart, she came back from a so-called girls' night out wearing these new earrings, simple but expensive looking. I asked where they came from. She blinked, then shrugged like it wasn't worth explaining. Lila let me borrow them, she said. But when I asked Lila about them later, casually, while we were all having brunch, she looked confused for a second before covering it up with a tight smile. It felt like a glitch. One of those tiny moments you try to ignore because if you dig too deep, you might not like what you find. That was the theme, really. I kept choosing not to dig. Not because I trusted her blindly, I don't think I did, not really, but because I didn't want to be that guy. The paranoid husband. The one who checks her phone when she showers or tracks her location or starts fights over earrings. I didn't want to become something bitter. So I kept swallowing the doubt. Over and over again. And then there was her language. Subtle shifts. Whenever we argued, and it was happening more often, she'd end the conversation with this heavy sigh and say, "You're not listening to me." At first, I thought she meant I was missing her point. That I wasn't empathizing enough. But looking back, I realized she meant something else. She wasn't trying to be heard, she was justifying what she already planned to do. Because if I wasn't listening, then it gave her permission. Permission to lie. To pull away. To rewrite the story in her head where I was the problem and she was just reacting. It's terrifying how easy it is to rewrite history when you're motivated by guilt. I think the last real clue, the one that nearly woke me up but still didn't, was 2 weeks before the party. We were at this little wine bar we used to love. Candlelit. Quiet. The kind of place we'd go to reconnect when life got heavy. She was distracted the whole time. Kept checking her watch. I made some dumb joke about her having a hot date, trying to be playful. She smiled, but not at me. Her eyes drifted. She was gone. I remember watching her swirl her glass, the red wine catching the light, and thinking, she's not here with me anymore. Not emotionally. Not mentally. Maybe not even physically. Still, I said nothing. I think I was afraid to say it out loud. Afraid that giving it a voice would make it real. That if I admitted it, even to myself, I'd have to do something about it. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to be a man whose wife didn't love him anymore. I wasn't ready to give up on the life we built. The routines, the plans, the memories etched into every room of that house. I wasn't ready to think about divorce lawyers or division of property or the awkward conversations with friends who would pretend to be shocked even though they'd probably seen it coming before I did. So I convinced myself it was just a rough patch. People grow apart sometimes, right? Maybe we were just in a lull. Maybe we needed a vacation. Maybe if I just held on long enough, she'd come back to me. But none of that mattered anymore. Because now I had seen her. That green dress. That smile that wasn't meant for me. That man with his hand on her back like he belonged there. And with that, the dam broke. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was just late. Too late. I didn't remember making the decision to drive to Lila's. It was like my hands moved before my mind caught up. All I knew was I couldn't sit in that car anymore. Parked in front of a home that suddenly didn't feel like mine. The wind had picked up by then, howling through the trees like it knew something I didn't. Branches scraped the roof as I backed out of the driveway. I drove with my jaw clenched, gripping the wheel too tight, heart pounding like I was headed into a fight, though I had no plan, no words, not even certainty about what I would find. But something in me already knew. Lila lived about 10 minutes away, in a neighborhood that had newer homes, bigger garages, and patios with string lights, the kind of place where people with good credit and perfect smiles host wine tastings and yoga-themed baby showers. When I turned onto her street, I could hear the music before I saw the house. The party was still going. Lights on, people spilling onto the porch, red Solo cups and laughter echoing into the night like the storm didn't exist. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, staring at the glowing windows. I told myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe she was inside helping Lila clean up. Maybe she hadn't seen her phone because it died. Maybe I'd find her and she'd be annoyed that I showed up unannounced. But she'd forgive me. But deep down, I knew better. I crossed the street, ignoring the sting of rain as it started to fall in sharp, scattered drops. The front door was cracked open. A burst of laughter poured out, followed by the sound of a drink spilling and someone shouting **TS, like we were all still in college. I stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt it. The shift. The way the air changed. Conversations didn't stop completely, but some eyes turned. Faces glanced toward me. Curious, confused, then uncomfortable. One girl at the kitchen counter nudged her friend and whispered something behind a hand. A guy I didn't recognize gave me a tight nod and looked away. I scanned the room, my pulse pounding so loud I could barely hear the music anymore. And then I saw her. She was sitting on the windowsill, tucked in between the curtain and a small decorative plant. Legs crossed, holding a drink in one hand and a man's hand in the other. She was smiling. Not fake, not forced. Genuinely smiling. That full, glowy look I hadn't seen directed at me in months. The man beside her was wearing a gray blazer. Same guy from the Instagram story. His body was angled toward her like no one else in the room existed. They looked like they were mid-flirt, mid-whatever you call it when you think you're alone. And then he leaned in. Not just close, lips to lips close. I stood there, frozen, watching my wife kiss another man in a room full of people who either didn't know or didn't care. He was the first to pull away. Megan still had her eyes closed for a second, like she was savoring it. And then someone, I don't even know who, said my name. Bryce. It echoed like thunder. Her eyes opened. Her head turned. And when she saw me, she froze. I've seen Megan surprised before. When I proposed. When I bought her that dumb puppy calendar she loved. When she thought she lost her passport at the airport. But this wasn't surprise. It was fear. And guilt. And annoyance all in one glance. Her smile vanished. Her posture stiffened. And instead of saying anything, she whispered. Almost like I'd ruined a moment that didn't belong to me. Why did you even come? That's when it hit me. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't panicking or jumping up to explain. She was disappointed. Like I was the one out of place. The man beside her straightened but didn't speak. He didn't defend her, didn't apologize. He just lowered his eyes like a kid who got caught cheating off someone's test. Megan slowly stood. The silence in the room was thick now. People shifting uncomfortably, pretending to look at their phones, pretending they weren't watching this car crash unfold. I took one step forward. Not to fight, not to accuse, just enough to get close enough to ask, quietly, like a stranger who's been lost for a long time. How long has this been going on? She blinked, And for the first time, her face softened. Not in affection, in resignation. 2 months, she said. Her voice wasn't defensive. Just final. 2 months. That meant when I brought her soup that day she said she had a migraine. She'd already kissed him. When she asked me to drive her to the airport, they'd probably already been talking. When she said she missed me, when she kissed me goodnight, this was already happening. And something inside me just shut off. Like a switch. I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't ask for details. I just stood there and nodded. Like I'd just been handed a diagnosis. No cure. Just a name for the sickness. I turned around and walked out. No one stopped me. No one said a word. Not even her. The rain hit harder as I stepped outside. But I didn't run to the car. I let it soak into my hoodie, into my shoes, into my skin. Felt better than the heat rising in my chest. I sat in my car for a long time. Hands on the wheel. Not driving. Just breathing. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream. But I felt nothing. Just empty space where trust used to be. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't in denial anymore. It was real. It had a name. A face. A timeline. The fact could no longer be denied. I didn't go home right away. I drove past our street twice without turning in. My headlights barely cut through the storm, and the windshield wipers squeaked like they were begging me to give up and pull over. I finally parked at the old overlook near the edge of town, where the trees thinned and the city lights flickered in the distance like a different world I didn't belong to anymore. I just sat there, rain hammering the roof, staring through the fogged glass. It was like my mind hit a wall. No tears, no rage, just this dull, sinking feeling, like standing in a house that had already burned down, wondering if you'd left the stove on. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the house looked exactly as I'd left it. But I wasn't the same person walking through that door. The lights were off, except for the warm glow from the kitchen. Soft, golden, like nothing had happened. And there she was, Megan, already home, wearing one of my t-shirts, the old, soft one she always stole when she wanted comfort. She looked up from her phone when she saw me, and for a second, she actually smiled, like everything was fine, like I hadn't just watched her kiss another man. "You're soaked," she said, standing up. I was starting to get worried. I walked past her. Not a word. Not yet. I went upstairs, grabbed a towel, changed into dry clothes. Every motion felt rehearsed, like I was following a routine I no longer belonged to. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to ask her why or how or what I did wrong. I didn't want a speech about "it just happened" or "I didn't mean to hurt you." I wasn't chasing answers anymore. I was chasing truth, and I was about to find it. I went down to the storage room to grab my charger. Not because I needed it, but because I needed space to breathe. That room had always been a mess. Old boxes, winter coats, Christmas lights we never took down properly. And that's where I found it. Purse. Her old black purse, the one she claimed she lost at the airport 6 months ago. The one she made such a show of replacing, swearing she'd left it in a taxi. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe curiosity. Maybe instinct. Or maybe something deeper. Something that had been whispering in the background for weeks, waiting to speak louder. Inside was a second phone. Slim. Silver. Still charged. No passcode. I stared at it for a long time before I powered it on. My hands weren't even shaking. It felt surgical, like dissecting something that had already died. The home screen lit up instantly, and then everything clicked into place. Texts, photos, names I didn't recognize at first, and then names I did. Not just him. The guy from the party. There were others. 3, maybe more. One saved as Cameron, hot beverage, a barista, based on their messages. Another just Jay, a coworker from her old marketing team. One named Matt Fire, the man from the party, the one whose hand lingered a little too long, the one she kissed like I never existed. The messages weren't just flirty. They were layered, personal, planned. I scrolled, reading fragments of conversations that told me this had been going on far longer than 2 months. Some of it went back to the spring dinners, hotels, meetings, photos, things I wasn't supposed to see. Smiles I thought were mine, now living in someone else's inbox. I found myself staring at one text she sent Jay, after a weekend I remembered well. The weekend she said she was visiting her sister out of town. It was perfect, just the escape I needed. Being with you reminds me of who I used to be. That was the weekend I spent painting our garage. Alone. I didn't scream. I didn't smash the phone. I didn't even feel heartbroken. I felt confirmed, like the puzzle had finally assembled itself, and I was staring at a picture I didn't recognize. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was a lifestyle, a decision. A person I didn't know wearing my t-shirt, sitting in our kitchen like she still had a right to. I walked back upstairs, slow, deliberate, holding the phone in my hand like an exhibit. She looked up from her cup of tea. I remember that detail because she had made my brand of tea. The same kind she used to hate. She looked up and saw the phone. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't gasp or panic. She just sat straighter. "You went through my stuff?" she asked, her voice flat, almost bored, like I'd violated some unspoken contract. I nodded. "You knew it was there," I said. "You just left it, in case your plan worked." She didn't respond. I sat across from her at the kitchen table. The silence was thick. Ticking clock, distant thunder, the hum of the refrigerator louder than ever. "Is that all?" I asked. "Or are there more?" She stared at the table. Then a quiet admission. There were others, but none of them meant anything. Could have laughed. None of them meant anything. She said it like she was handing me mercy. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I didn't recognize her anymore. The woman who once danced barefoot in the living room, who cried watching Pixar movies, who kissed my knuckles when I was stressed. Gone. "I'm not angry," I said, voice low. "You ruined everything. But now I know." I didn't wait for her to respond. I stood, walked down the hall and set up camp in the guest room, a room we'd always reserved for visiting family. I didn't sleep that night, but not because I was anxious. I was awake because I had clarity. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. Morning came, but it didn't feel like a new day. It just felt like more of the same silence, except now it had weight, thickness. Something cold that pressed against your chest even when the coffee's hot and the sun's trying to act normal through the blinds. I got up from the guest room, didn't bother shaving or doing much of anything. Walked past the living room like a ghost in my own house. And there she was, Megan, sitting at the kitchen island with a bowl of cereal and that same second phone sitting next to her, screen black, but visible. Like it wasn't some damning piece of evidence anymore. Like it was just a phone. She didn't hide it. She didn't even try to cover it up. She just glanced up, looked me in the eye and said, "We need to figure out what you want to do." Just like that. Like we were roommates talking about splitting utility bills, not a married couple standing in the ash of what used to be a life. I didn't say anything right away. I pulled a mug from the cabinet, filled it with whatever coffee was left in the pot, and sat down across from her. I wanted to study her face, not to look for lies. No, I already had the truth. I was searching for something harder to find. Regret. But it wasn't there. There was no panic. No breakdown. No, I can't believe what I've done. None of the tears people imagine in scenes like this. Just that steady, empty calm. Like she was already living in the version of her life where I was gone. I finally held up the phone, tilted it slightly in my hand. "You didn't even bother to delete any of it." She didn't flinch. "I figured you'd find it eventually." "Was that the plan?" I asked. "Leave it somewhere I'd eventually stumble across? Make it easier for yourself." She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for hours. "No. But I stopped hiding it when I stopped feeling guilty." That line hit me like a gut punch. Not because it was loud. Because it was quiet. Simple. Honest. "You stopped feeling guilty," I repeated. She nodded. It got too hard. Pretending. Acting like everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. "You noticed, didn't you? Things haven't been good for a long time." I scoffed. "You think that excuses this?" "I'm not making excuses," she said. "I'm telling you how it happened. You wanted the truth." I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to flip the table and shout every bitter thing swirling in my head. But I didn't, because she wasn't crying. And somehow that hurt worse than any betrayal ever could. "You cheated on me," I said, slow and steady. "You lied, over and over, to my face. I know. And you don't even look sorry." Her eyes flicked down for a second, then back up. "I'm sorry it happened this way. I'm sorry I hurt you. But I don't regret what I needed." Those words stuck in the air like smoke. What I needed. Like I was a pair of shoes she'd outgrown. Like she'd tried me on long enough, but now she needed something that fit her better. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling for a long moment, letting the quiet stretch. "I used to think you were the best thing that ever happened to me," I said finally. "Now I realize I never actually knew who you were." She didn't argue. That silence was the closest thing to an agreement we'd shared in weeks. I stood, walked to the sink, and poured out the rest of my coffee. My hands didn't even shake anymore. That was the weird part, the calm that followed the crash. "You don't have to pretend anymore," I said. "I won't stop you from seeing whoever you want. I'm not interested in playing detective. I'm just done." She turned toward me then, a flicker of something in her expression. Maybe it was surprise. Or maybe she really did expect me to fight for this. I didn't. I grabbed a pillow and blanket from the hallway closet and headed back to the guest room. That night I didn't cry. I didn't text anyone. I didn't scroll through old photos or reread her messages, looking for signs I missed. I just lay there, awake, staring at the ceiling fan. Not from anxiety, not from heartbreak, from clarity. Because once you see someone's true face, the one without apology, without fear, without regret, you don't forget it. You can't. The next morning, I didn't wait for her to speak. I grabbed a notepad and started listing what was mine: laptop, the photos of my parents, a few books, garage key. I found a short-term apartment near the highway. Just one room, white walls, a bed that wasn't ours. I didn't announce I was leaving. I just packed. When I rolled the suitcase down the hall, Megan stood in the doorway wearing my sweatshirt, arms crossed. "You're giving up on everything?" I paused, looking her in the eye. "No. I'm leaving what gave up on me first." She didn't cry, just sat on the steps, watching as if she'd finally realized control had slipped through her hands. Weeks passed. The pain faded, replaced by space. I didn't check her socials. I stopped replaying the night. I bought groceries, cooked meals that weren't for two. I started running again, mornings, rain or shine. Slowly, I came back to myself. One morning, I caught my reflection and didn't look away. I wasn't a husband or a victim or a broken thing. I was Bryce, the man who asked her to stay and got silence. The man who walked away when the